You know, today marks the 61st anniversary of the signing of the Voting Rights Act. That was a landmark civil rights law signed by President Lyndon B that transformed access to the ballot box for millions of Americans. To talk about its legacy and why it still matters today, we're joined by the LBJ Foundation CEO and Chairman Mark Updegrove. Mark, thanks for being here with us.
Of course, glad to be here.
Yeah, so let's start here with a little bit of a history lesson. Give us the backstory. What made the signing such a turning point in our country's history?
Well, effectively, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 sees for the first time in our country the full flower of our democracy. While we had had a civil war that had freed enslaved people and made them citizens through the 14th Amendment, and we had in the 15th Amendment their right to vote, they were not able to do so because of systematic voting suppression principally in the southern states. The Voting Rights Act ensured that there would not be barriers to the ballot box, principally for people of color. So we saw much greater voter turnout, and we had a truly representative democracy because all of our citizens had free and unfettered ballot access to the ballot box, Mark.
And this was, voter suppression was subtle in some ways and obvious in other ways.
Obvious insofar as there were tests when people were trying to register to vote. They would face registrars who would ask them daunting questions like, how many bubbles are there in a bar of soap? How many jelly beans are there in this job? They would ask them to recite certain amendments to the Constitution, things that they themselves could not answer. And it prevented people from registering in large numbers. So the Voting Rights Act was absolutely pivotal in ensuring that there was no impediment to people voting freely.
Mark, tell us a little bit about the role that President Johnson played in getting this legislation through Congress.
Well, he was very much a catalyst for voting rights, as he was, as you suggested, for civil rights. He had put on the books the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the previous year, but we had yet to really address the issue of voting rights. The 1965 Voting Rights Act did just that, but there was really a catalyst. There was a thwarted march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, thwarted bloodily and brutally by Alabama state troopers that brought to light the voting suppression that we saw routinely in the South. And the American people wouldn't stand for it. And LBJ used that crisis to urge reluctant lawmakers to support the Voting Rights Act, Mark.
And since 1965, Mark, the Voting Rights Act has been challenged and changed through court rulings over the years. So how has its impact evolved, and what challenges is it seeing today?
Unfortunately, the Voting Rights Act, which LBJ considered his greatest legislative triumph, and that's really saying something if you look at the laws that LBJ put on the books, the things that he signed into law that essentially create the foundation of modern America. But it has been largely gutted since LBJ was president. That said, we don't see that systematic voting suppression that we once did, particularly in the southern states. So in that respect, the Voting Rights Act has done enormous things to bring our country forward. That said, we still see voting suppression tactics put in place today, Mark.
And with that, if President Johnson, let's say he were alive today and he could see the conversations today about voting rights, what do you think the conversations that we have would stand out to him now?
I think he would be deeply concerned about the questions about our electoral system. I think he would be concerned about the push by the Trump administration to federalize these things, to put forward the so-called Save America Act. He would want to see free and unfettered access to the ballot box. He would not want to see questions about our electoral system, which is sound by all accounts, but has been challenged by the incumbent president, Mark.
Giving us some insight 61 years later after the signing of that historic act. LBJ Foundation Chairman and CEO Mark Updegrove, I want to thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much.